A Russian intelligence asset is active inside the USS Gerald R. Ford. That is a fact. The $12 billion centerpiece of American naval power, a floating fortress designed to be impenetrable, has been compromised from within. But how did a single operative, a ghost, bypass layers of counterintelligence designed to stop exactly this? And what is their ultimate target aboard a warship carrying the firepower of a nation? To understand the attack now unfolding in the Mediterranean, we must first look north, to the bone-chilling depths of the Barents Sea. Just 3 months ago, the event was barely a whisper in Western media, a footnote, but in Moscow, it was a declaration of war. The vessel was the Kilo 7, not just any submarine. It was a heavily modified Project 636.3 Kilo class attack sub, a black hole, the quietest diesel-electric submarine in the Russian Northern Fleet, retrofitted with experimental stealth coatings and a new generation of Kalibr cruise missiles. It was a ghost hunter, designed to stalk and kill NATO naval assets. On May 10, 2024, Kilo 7 slipped its moorings in Polyarny. It was on a classified patrol. 48 hours later, it vanished. Russian state media reported a tragic accident, a catastrophic malfunction, a fire, the usual narrative. But intelligence analysts at Fort Meade saw something else. They saw the electronic ghost of a U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft loitering at 30,000 feet, directly over Kilo 7's last known position. They saw telemetry intercepts suggesting the deployment of a new variant of the Mark 54 lightweight torpedo. The Kremlin never officially acknowledged the loss as a hostile action. To do so would be to admit a devastating failure. That an American asset could detect and destroy their most advanced quiet submarine was an intolerable humiliation. But behind the stone walls of the Lubyanka and the Ministry of Defense, a response was being crafted. Not a conventional military reprisal. Something asymmetrical. Something personal. They codenamed it Operation Zime, the Serpent. And the target for this serpent was not a submarine or a destroyer. It was the heart of the fleet, the crown jewel, the USS Gerald R. Ford. Now, fast forward to 72 hours ago. The Ford is on station in the eastern Mediterranean, a projection of absolute power, a 4.5-acre sovereign piece of American territory. Suddenly, a series of minor, unrelated glitches begin to ripple through the ship. They are small, almost unnoticeable. Is this the teething trouble of a complex new warship, or the first tremor of a meticulously planned attack? The first anomaly was in the galley. A refrigeration unit control panel malfunctioned, spoiling 300 pounds of produce. Trivial. The second was in flight control. A single sensor on the electromagnetic aircraft launch system, the EMALS, reported a pressure reading that was 0.01% outside of normal parameters. It was logged and cleared in under 5 minutes. The third was a flicker in the comm system. A routine satellite link dropped for less than 2 seconds before re-establishing. Individually, these are noise, the background radiation of operating the single most complex machine ever built. On a carrier with over 5,000 personnel and millions of lines of code, things break. But an NCIS agent attached to the ship's intelligence unit, a specialist in cyber warfare, saw a ghost in the machine. He saw not a pattern of failure, but a pattern of access. This wasn't about causing damage. Not yet. Each tiny glitch required a diagnostic check. Each check forced a system administrator to log in, run a query, and access a specific subsystem. The galley's climate control, the catapult's sensor array, the communications uplink. The agent realized with a cold dread that these were not malfunctions. They were electronic tripwires. Someone was mapping the ship's nervous system. They were testing the locks. The mole wasn't a saboteur planting bombs. They were a cartographer, drawing a map to the ship's most sensitive data. The target wasn't the ship's hull, but its brain. The targeting data for its Tomahawk missiles. The electronic warfare libraries that allow it to blind its enemies. The cryptographic keys for its secure communications. The operational parameters of its 2 A-1B nuclear reactors. This is the data that could cripple not just the Ford, but compromise the entire carrier fleet. The hunt began in total secrecy. The ship's captain, the carrier strike group admiral, and a handful of intelligence officers. No one else could know. Panic is a worse enemy than any saboteur. They began a quiet audit, a digital manhunt through terabytes of network logs, searching for a single user, a single IP address, a single login that was out of place. They were looking for a needle in a haystack the size of a city. Thousands of sailors, marines, and civilian contractors, each with a different level of clearance, each logging in and out of dozens of systems every single day. The serpent was hiding in plain sight. Then, last night, at 0200 hours ship time, they found it. A data packet, incredibly small, less than 1 megabyte. It was transmitted from the carrier during a scheduled, low-bandwidth maintenance uplink to a commercial telecom satellite. The transmission was masked, broken into thousands of micropackets, and interleaved with routine diagnostic data. It was designed to be invisible. But what was in that tiny burst of data that was worth risking exposure for? And who sent it? The packet was gone, sucked into a Russian signals intelligence station before the Ford's own watchdogs even knew it was sent. But the transmission left a residue, an electronic fingerprint. The NCIS team, working with NSA elements back in Maryland, traced the packet's point of origin. It wasn't from the command center, not from the intelligence spaces or the reactor controls. The signal originated from a network terminal on Deck 3, Sector Gamma, the hangar bay, specifically from a maintenance terminal used by aviation ordnancemen, the very sailors responsible for arming the F-35 and F-A-18 fighter jets that are the carrier's fists. This changed everything. The mole wasn't just a data thief. They had physical access to the ship's weapons. The profile of the agent, the Serpent, suddenly snapped into terrifying focus. Not a high-ranking officer whose absence would be noted, but a lower enlisted technician. Someone with a security clearance, but whose presence in weapons bays, near aircraft, and at maintenance terminals at all hours would be completely normal. One of thousands. Anonymous. Trusted. Invisible. They could walk past a $50 million fighter jet with a bomb on a trolley, and no one would look twice. The NCIS agent and 2 armed Marines, all in plain clothes to avoid creating a scene, began moving toward Deck 3. The ship remained at Condition 3, normal steaming. The thousands of sailors on board went about their duties, completely unaware of the invisible war being fought in their midst. The team's objective was to isolate and detain any personnel near the compromised terminal, a quiet, surgical extraction. They moved through the narrow passageways, the hum of the ship a constant companion. As they reached the hatch leading to the hangar bay, a klaxon suddenly blared. Not the general quarters alarm, something else. A piercing, technical alarm tone echoed through the ship's internal comms, a sound few on board had ever heard outside of a drill. It was an automated alert from engineering, a primary coolant loop pressure warning. From Reactor Number 1. A reactor incident, the single greatest fear on a nuclear vessel. Was this it? Was the Serpent's endgame not data theft, but a meltdown in the middle of the Atlantic? Had the entire intelligence team misread the signs completely? But in that split second, the agent's training fought against his terror. It was wrong. It was all wrong. The profile was of a ghost, an intelligence asset, not a suicide bomber. A reactor incident is loud, messy, and leaves no one to collect the prize. This was misdirection. A brilliant, terrifying piece of theater. But to what end? While the ship's most critical personnel, the captain, the XO, the reactor officer, would now be sprinting towards the armored confines of reactor control. Who was being left unguarded? What system was being left exposed? Ignore it, the agent growled into his comms, speaking to the 2 Marines with him. It's a ghost. We continue to the objective. It was an order that could end his career, or his life. Pushing through the hatch, they entered the cavernous hangar bay. The scene was controlled chaos. The piercing wail of the engineering alarm was everywhere, but the flight deck crews were disciplined. They were moving to secure aircraft, moving toward their damage control stations. It was the perfect cover. 1,000 people, all in motion, all distracted. The agent's eyes scanned the bay, searching for the compromised maintenance terminal. His comm link crackled. It was the cyber specialist back in the SCIF. I see it now. The voice was strained. God, he's good. The reactor alarm wasn't the main event. It was the trigger. Trigger for what? The agent barked, weaving through a team of sailors hauling fire suppression gear. It's a network protocol. A. Castle Doctrine. Response. In the event of a potential core breach, the ship's network automatically firewalls the engineering and command sections from all non-essential systems to prevent a cascading cyber attack during a physical crisis. It's a safety feature. The agent stopped dead in his tracks, a horrible understanding dawning on him. He didn't find a vulnerability, he whispered. He used a safety feature against us. The mole had used a false alarm to create a digital island, a segment of the network temporarily cut off from the ship's main security monitoring, and he was sitting right in the middle of it. The NCIS team reached the workstation. It was empty. The screen was dark. The Serpent was gone. He's not here, the agent reported. He's vanished. Worse, the analyst replied, his voice low. The logs from this partition he wasn't downloading. There was an upload, a big one, from an encrypted solid-state drive connected to this terminal. An upload? It didn't make sense. Why upload something to the ship? The agent looked around him. At the lethal machinery filling the bay. The F-35s, the Growlers, the rows of guided munitions waiting on their racks. He walked over to a nearby trolley, where aviation ordnance men were working on a rack of AGM-154s, the Joint Standoff Weapon, JSOWs, smart bombs. He knew that the terminal wasn't just for engine diagnostics. It was used to flash mission data and targeting software directly into the weapon's onboard computers. The mole hadn't been stealing the ship's secrets. He was poisoning its weapons. He had uploaded a new, malicious targeting package. They weren't just hunting a spy anymore. They were facing a saboteur whose act of war was still waiting to happen, ticking away inside the very bombs they were about to load onto their own fighter jets. "Stop the loading!" the agent roared into his comms. But the analyst's voice came back, thin and terrified. "It's worse. I've broken a piece of the upload's encryption. The target isn't a set of coordinates. It's a friendly IFF signature." The Serpent hadn't aimed the bombs at a place. He had aimed them at their own side. But who was the real target? And was he still on board? The agent's blood ran cold. It wasn't just sabotage. It was fratricide on a fleet-wide scale. A decapitation strike from within. He grabbed the nearest aviation ordnanceman by his jersey. Who was at that workstation? Who uploaded the last mission package? The young sailor, startled, just shook his head. "I don't know, man. Could have been anyone from the air wing?" Of course, the Serpent was a ghost because he wore the right uniform. He was hiding in plain sight. "He can't be far," the agent muttered, his eyes darting across the chaos, looking for a detail that was out of place. A face without the sheen of panicked sweat. A gait that was too calm, too purposeful. He saw him then, a figure in a brown maintenance jersey, moving steadily, not towards a damage control station, but towards the number 3 aircraft elevator. He wasn't running. He was retreating with intent. "He's making for the flight deck," the agent snarled into his comms. "He's trying to get off this ship." He began to push through the throng, the 2 Marines flanking him, clearing a path. The target wasn't just escaping. He was trying to get to the E-2 Hawkeye being prepped for the next launch cycle. The eyes of the fleet, a perfect escape vehicle, and the best seat in the house to watch his work unfold. "It's the flagship," the analyst yelled over the comms. "He's targeting the Admiral's carrier." The Serpent reached the elevator, stepping on just as the massive platform began its slow, groaning ascent to the flight deck. There was no time. The agent saw a maintenance ladder bolted to the side of the bay wall. "Go!" he ordered the Marines, pointing towards the elevator's controls. He holstered his sidearm and began to climb, pulling himself up the steel rungs, the roar of the ship's engines, and alarms of physical force against him. He hauled himself over the edge onto the windswept flight deck, just as the elevator settled into place. The scene was even more chaotic than below. Jet engines screamed, their exhaust distorting the air. The Serpent was already halfway to the Hawkeye, his silhouetted stark against the pre-dawn gloom. The agent broke into a dead sprint, the non-skid surface of the deck grabbing at his boots. The Serpent heard him coming. He dropped his toolkit, and when he turned, he wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding a flare gun. The Serpent fired. A searing red projectile shot past the agent's head, momentarily blinding him. He tackled the man hard, sending them both skidding across the deck, stopping just shy of a spinning jet intake. The fight was brutal and clumsy. 2 men fueled by adrenaline and desperation. The agent landed a punch, and the Serpent grunted, a thin smile on his face. "Too late," he coughed, blood speckling his lips. "The code is already in the catapult launch system, a parting gift. It will attach itself to anything you launch." The agent's heart stopped. He slammed the Serpent's head against the deck, knocking him unconscious, then scrambled for his comms. "He's uploaded a virus to the launch system. Can you stop it?" The analyst's voice was a strained whisper. "I can't kill it from here, but I can corrupt the targeting string. I can make the bombs blind. You have to abort the launch. AL launches. Now!" In the distance, the catapult officer on the bubble was giving the signal. The F-18 at the front of the line was seconds from being thrown into the sky. There was no time for procedure. The agent stood up, drew his Sig Sauer, and fired 2 rounds directly into the air. The sharp crack of the pistol cut through the engine roar for a split second. All heads on the flight deck snapped towards him. He ran towards the catapult, waving his arms in a frantic, universal, stop signal, placing himself directly in the launch path. For a terrifying moment, the jet continued to power up. Then, the officer saw him. His eyes widened. He slammed a large red button. The crisis was over. The sun rose, casting a golden light across the now quiet flight deck. The red emergency lights died, replaced by the clean light of morning. The agent stood there for a long moment, watching the rest of the carrier group sail serenely on the calm Atlantic, oblivious to the bullet they had just dodged. He looked down at the unconscious saboteur, then back at the lethal, beautiful machines of war that surrounded him. The front line was no longer a place you could see on a map. It was everywhere. In the code, in the wires, in the trust between sailors, and the battle for it was just beginning. The invisible wars are the most dangerous. They are fought in the shadows, in the signals, and in the space between ones and zeros. We are here to drag them into the light. To understand the new battlefield, you have to know where to look. Subscribe to Breaking_the_Front.